Hello, everyone. I was trying to figure out if I could give you the week off of a lecture, but chapters 13 and 14 are not very long. And so I realized I should probably, by tomorrow, put a lecture because the last week I want you to concentrate on your papers and um, finish taking your final exam so that finals week you can have the entire week to just turn in your paper and work on the final submission. So before you could finish your final paper, there is one big section that we have yet to go over, which is the discussion section. And so today I am providing you this document on the discussion section, and I will talk about how a discussion section should be written and what goes into a discussion section. So um, we will also use this towards that last quiz, as I will write to you guys in an announcement, but half of the quiz or so will be on chapter 13, quasi-experimental studies. The other half will be on which parts of a paper go in which section. So we have talked about the introduction section in class. We have written our own method section. And those two main sections are going to be used in your first submission when you turn in that first submission in about 2 weeks or so. For the rest of the paper, the other two main sections are the results, which we just went over and did that homework assignment for last week, and this one, the discussion section. There are also a couple of little things like the title page, the graph, and the abstract, which I'll go over in the next couple weeks with you. But the discussion section is the one that is effectively the biggest of the sections, and it is worth the most points of your final paper. So I would definitely concentrate on all of it, but definitely make sure that your discussion section is not lacking, because there are at least 6 paragraphs worth of information, and I would really want you to get as many points as you can for turning in your paper, which includes a really thorough job of the discussion section. So let's read through what the discussion section is, what it contains, and how we would sort of, how we would construct it. So the discussion section, when we talked about the results section, the results tell us whether or not we got significant differences. The results tell us what the statistics backed up. The results section tells us where the direction of the effect was. Acoustic scored higher than semantic, or semantic scored higher than acoustic, and blah, blah, blah. The one thing that you do not do in a results section is you don't justify as to why. In the discussion section, this is where you justify as to why you may have got or didn't get what you wanted. So a lot of this is personal, subjective interpretation. Some of it may be comparing and contrasting to your literature that you used in the introduction section, and you're justifying why or why not it worked or didn't work, comparing it to the original articles that you mentioned, and talking about if there were any problems or shortcomings in your experiment. So this is where you get to be a little creative in this case. This is where it would make it a little easier if we actually did the experiment instead of hypothetically. But since we don't have that option, this is where you get to be creative on this one. So I'll give you a couple of hints, and then I'll let you use your own imagination or your own research mind to be able to come up with it. So the primary purpose of the discussion section is to evaluate and interpret the findings that you got, especially in light of the objectives you stated in the introduction. The discussion section should answer the question of what your results actually mean. Basically, you want to use this section to show the reader how your study has contributed to a resolution of the original problem under the investigation. So reminder, the upside down triangle of the introduction starts off really broad with the general statement about the background of your topic. and then gets very specific down to the point when you name your 3 hypotheses, and gets a little bit more specific above as you're giving the background on previous studies that have already been done and where your study sort of fits into that, fills the hole, so to speak. Method tells you exactly what you did, results tell you what you found, and now the discussion section is the opposite of the introduction. So think of the discussion section like a right side up triangle where the point is at the top. You're going to start with a repeat of what you found in the results section, and you are going to then elaborate on that and make it really broad and end in a more general way, like you started, with sort of implications of what this means for the real world. So the structural organization of the discussion section is to a large extent the reverse of that used in the introduction. Here you want to begin with a summary of your specific findings and then end with a discussion of the general conclusions and theoretical and practical implications that can be drawn from your study. So how do we organize a discussion section? Well, again, it should look like a right side up triangle. It is a good idea to begin. So the first paragraph or so is a brief restatement of the goal or original hypotheses of your study. Then you will indicate how the findings you obtain either supported or did not support your original hypotheses. Compare and contrast your findings with those of the other studies in your reported introduction. So that's the second portion, which is going to be about 3 paragraphs. The first paragraph is basically restating your what you found, your findings, and then you're going to compare and contrast. Let me back up just a bit. You may have a reason why it worked or didn't work. In this case, we're going to assume that you got good results. I'm going to look for numbers to give you, to go with your results section that give you significant results. So you would probably state in your reasoning, this is what we found. I predicted that people who were cheaters would be better at making up lies and being more creative, and the study supports that conclusion, right? So you would mention that with your findings in the first paragraph. Paragraphs 2, 3, and 4 are going to be comparing and contrasting to your previous studies. So this is where you would do just a few sentences of, in the original study, they looked at this. The current study, we looked at this, or you can say I in this case. Normally it would be we because it's a group project. So we looked at this and we found the same results. We believe this is because blah, 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 or you can say, I believe this is because, and you give a reason. So compared, contrasting, we found the same type of idea. I compared males versus females in mine, assuming that males were better at lying and therefore more creative or would be more likely to cheat, blah, 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 right? And then, so you start with comparing the seed article to your findings, and then we go to the second article that you found and the third article that you found. Remember the 2 additional articles you're looking for. So that'll be 4 paragraphs, right? So that's the restating of the findings and sort of reasons why it worked or didn't work. And then 3 paragraphs, 1 for each article that you reviewed in the introduction, comparing and contrasting your results with that one. What did you do differently from that one? Did you find the same thing? What's the reasoning behind that? So each article would be a paragraph. After that, so here we go. Compare and contrast your finding with those of other studies that you reported in your introduction. In general, you basically want to evaluate your results with respect to the original problem that you set out to address and with respect to the findings of previous work addressing this problem. If your results are not what you expected or are inconsistent with the previous studies, then you should briefly speculate as to why these differences were obtained. Maybe it works better when it's not gender. Maybe it works, maybe it just further supports your hypothesis that men are lying dogs and women are not. So maybe they're not so creative when it comes to excuses or creativity in when you're caught in a lie. So you might, for example, want to discuss methodological problems that you encountered in conducting your study. So that leads us to the next one, right? So after we have restated our findings and sort of given a little bit of reasoning as to why we think it worked or didn't work, and then we gave 3 more paragraphs talking about comparing and contrasting to the specific articles we mentioned in the introduction. Even if you got results that you wanted, there may have been things that were not ideal for your experiment. So we call them sometimes shortcomings or potential flaws in the experiment. So after your first 4 paragraphs, your next one should be, and it could be combined with, future directions. So if your results are not what you expected or they're inconsistent with previous results, you should briefly speculate as to why those differences were obtained. You might, for example, want to discuss any methodological problems that you encountered in conducting your study. Maybe that you didn't have, one of the biggest ones that we always talk about when we run these in class is that we have a minimum of 35 people and sometimes a maximum of like 50. And maybe, especially if it's a between group project, you did not have enough subjects. Now, I'm going to assume between subjects, and I'm going to probably give you data enough for 80 people, which would be 20 per group. So maybe that's good enough. Maybe you can say that differences would have even been greater if we had more people. So maybe there was a lack of n, right? Small n, or lack of number of people in the study. That could be one way that it didn't work. Maybe you think that you used that rat test, and maybe that rat test was really good for the original study that you based your seed article, but maybe the rat wasn't exactly the best DV to measure yours. So these, I would like you to list 2 or 3, I would say minimum of 3, let's go with that, 3 shortcomings in the experiment or methodological flaws. In that same paragraph, how would you fix that? So in future studies, you could say we would run this study again with more participants, or we would, make sure to use a different measure for DV than the RAT test. We would come up with our own, or something like that. And because you did get, most likely we're going to show significant studies, one of the things for future studies is not to even think about this one, but what would you do next? So in future studies, researchers should consider using gender as a thing, or looking at age, or looking at another IV maybe that you didn't use for this experiment. Maybe next time we can see if cheating works, if it works well for cheating, people who cheat on their significant other as opposed to just cheating in a game, right? So you would, for your future studies, as part of your shortcomings and future studies, in one paragraph, you would say these are the things that could have been improved upon. In future studies, we'll improve upon those things, and you can look to other directions. What would you, if you got significant results, what would be the next follow-up experiment to this one, right? Would we look about, see if maybe adding somebody that corrects these behaviors, right? What would happen if you got caught cheating as opposed to just know that you were cheating or not, right? These are all ways that you could run a study in the future based on this. And then the last, so that's paragraph 5, and then the 6th one, the last one, is to try to end your discussion section on a positive note by pointing out the importance in your findings in terms of their theoretical or practical implications, or at least implications for further research. So the last paragraph should be, okay, you did a study on people that cheat and people that are creative. Why? What does this have to do with the real world? So your last paragraph, right? Remember, we're going from the, again, this is a right side up triangle, so going from the point, very specific, of what you actually found in your study, to the very end, which is a general statement about what this has to do with the real world. So maybe, in the real world, you could say something like that. In the real world, cheating has its place. We see creativity is needed for people to create new inventions, to create new movies, to create all kinds of new situations. Scientists need to be creative to think of new ways to cure cancer or other things like that. So this study is a way to show that people who have a tendency to cheat may also be the ones that tend to think outside the box and are more creative, right? I'm just riffing here, but you guys can take the time to think about how you'd want to do that. The nice thing about this type of paper is you're giving your own personal analysis for the discussion section. So you don't have to spew something specific, and what you say is based on your own thoughts. So there's no wrong answer there. The only thing that's wrong is if you leave any of these paragraphs out. So in the final paper, which is worth 200 points, I believe that this section itself is worth 44 points. So please, the only thing I ask of you is to just try to put as much detail as you can. Again, a lot of it is just things that you come up with in your head. So you're not like researching something to look up for this one. This is your own analysis and interpretation. You are comparing and contrasting to your previous articles, but most of it is your own sort of analysis. And I just want to see how you can come up with that and keep the proper form. So overview of the entire paper. After studying your report, the reader should, I don't know what that little blue box is doing there, should be able to see the connection between the problem you set forth in the introduction, the method and procedures you used to investigate this problem, and the conclusions you reached with respect to this problem based on your findings. So basically, it should be a really nice flow between the introduction, then the method, then the results, and now how you're ending your paper with the discussion. With this objective in mind, one of the things that you would do once you finish the paper is look over your entire report once you've completed all 4 of these major sections and look to see if there's continuity. Do we see the upside down triangle as you go from the broad topic to your specific hypotheses? And then at the discussion where you start with your specific findings based on your hypotheses and end with a general statement of what this means in the real world. Why is this study important? What are you contributing to the real world in this study, right? So with this objective in mind, look over your entire report once you've completed the major sections. Can you see continuity in the research process? How you began with a general problem or question, what you did to address the problem or question, so method, what you found out, results, and finally, what you can conclude from the results. So what do the results mean that you obtained regarding the original question or problem? So a well-written report should reflect the continuity of the research process. One of the things that I always said to my classes on ground is when you're writing the paper, maybe if you have a significant other or a parent or a roommate that is not in the psychology field, it's actually probably better if they're not, or even if they are, to be able to look at this and just from an outsider's eye view, does it flow? Does it seem to go together, right? So that would help you. So when I give you this recording, I will give you a copy of this document, and I will also outline the 6 paragraphs or so that you will be responsible for at very minimum. They could be small paragraphs, they could be bigger, depending on how much you want to write about if you're on a roll or if you're just trying to get it done. But 6 paragraphs is the minimum for this section. Thank you for listening to me ramble on, and let's get through these last few weeks. I will talk to you soon.